On 15 August 1944, the Allies opened a second invasion front in France by landing in the Provence. The landings were known as Operation Dragoon. However, the Normandy campaign has largely overshadowed the landings in southern France. In this video, we will take a closer look at one of the 3 American landing beaches of Operation Dragoon. We will take a look at Camel Beach, the objective of the 36th Infantry Division. The landings in southern France were initially planned to be executed in conjunction with the landings in Normandy. However, a lack of resources axed this two-pronged approach. By July 1944, the opening of a second front in France was reconsidered. The ports in Normandy had become congested and no longer had the capacity to properly supply the Allies with sufficient supplies. Additionally, the French Liberation Army, keen to involve more French forces in the liberation of France, called for a revival of the plan. In July, the green light was given and plans were made to land in August. Through Operation Dragoon, the Allied High Command sought to secure the major harbours on the French Mediterranean coast to open both new points of entry into France and apply further pressure on a German opponent that was starting to crumble in Normandy. After preliminary commando missions, including a paratrooper operation behind German lines in the immediate hinterland of the invasion beaches, the US 6th Corps would land on the Côte d'Azur beaches with the close support of a vast naval task force. Opposing 6th Corps would be forces of Army Group G, which had been considerably weakened as its main divisions had been replaced by the woefully under-equipped third-rate Ostlegionen. 3 main landing beaches were identified. The 3rd Infantry Division was to land at Alpha Beach on the Saint-Raphaël Peninsula, while the 45th Infantry Division was to land at Delta Beach, just northeast of Sainte-Maxime. The experienced 36th Infantry Division was to land at Camel Beach in the Aguet sector to the northeast of Saint-Raphaël. Major General John Dahlquist, in command of the 36th Infantry Division, was tasked with securing the east bank of the Argence River, and his main objectives included the capture of Frejus, Puget-sur-Argence, Le Mouy, as well as the mountainous region of the Esterel forest. Camel Beach was subdivided into 3 sectors. The westernmost beach, Camel Red, was an open sandy beach near the Argences estuary. This was perhaps the most heavily defended beach of Operation Dragoon. In the middle was Camel Green near Dramont, with Camel Bleu at Antheor being further to the northeast. Both these beaches were quite small and rocky and were not very suited for major landing operations. Despite these difficulties, Camel Beach was considered paramount in the overall scheme of Operation Dragoon as it provided an entrance into the Argence Valley. Defending the sector was the 2nd Battalion 765th Grenadier Regiment of the 242nd Infantry Division. They would be supported by a Field Artillery Battalion, a Naval Battery, and a 1038th Anti-Tank Battalion. In reserve was the 3rd Battalion 765th Grenadier Regiment. The naval fleet had arrived just before dawn and began to pummel the coastline. The attack, which was preceded by a naval and aerial bombardment, began at 8 am on the 15th of August 1944. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 141st Infantry Regiment landed abreast at Camel Green, while the 1st Battalion of the regiment landed at Camel Blue. 4 M4A1 duplex-drive Sherman tanks of the 753rd Tank Battalion had accompanied each of the landing forces. The infantry landed under light small arms fire. While the artillery was reported as being quite heavy, the barrages were not very accurate, owing to a lack of forward artillery observers in the German coastal defences. The 1st Battalion did encounter some machine gun fire, and it wasn't until 9 am that the firing ceased at Camel Blue. Camel Green was captured with relative ease, but the 2nd and 3rd Battalions did encounter stiffer opposition near Aguet, necessitating the 1st Battalion to temporarily swing back to support them. While both beaches were secure by 10 am, it took the 141st Infantry Regiment until 5 pm to properly seize the roadstead shoreline. Having secured the initial beachhead, the 1st Battalion 141st Infantry Regiment swung northeast along the coast towards Thioul-sur-Mer and La Napoule, which was defended by the 4th Battalion 239th Grenadier Regiment of the 148th Infantry Division. Many of the Ost troops promptly surrendered to the Americans. By dusk, the 1st Battalion had advanced 2 miles along the N98 north of Camel Blue. The 2nd Battalion was just 1 mile short of the N7, just 2 miles clear of La Napoule. During the afternoon, the 3rd Battalion would be deployed in between both its sister battalions. The 143rd Infantry Regiment landed shortly after the beaches had been cleared by the 141st Infantry Regiment. The battalions of the 143rd landed one after another on Camel Green, with the 1st Battalion touching down at 9:45 am, the 2nd Battalion at 10:05 am, and the 3rd Battalion at 10:35 am. The 1st Battalion had quickly seized the high ground north of the landing beach, where it waited for the 3rd Battalion before resuming its advance west to attack Saint-Raphaël. The 3rd Battalion would take over from the 1st Battalion, while the 2nd Battalion moved along the coast to attack Saint-Raphaël from the east. The 143rd was to swiftly capture Saint-Raphaël to support the envisioned landing of the 142nd Infantry Regiment at Camel Red. This regiment had been tasked with extending the beachhead and linking up with the airborne forces to the north. In approaching Saint-Raphaël, the 2nd Battalion of the 143rd Infantry Regiment encountered stiff opposition along the N98 coastal road. By 2 p.m, the scheduled landing time of the 142nd Infantry Regiment, the 143rd had not yet reached Saint-Raphaël and could therefore not assist in the landing. Further west, the neighbouring 45th Division was also still too far away to aid the 142nd in their landing. The 142nd was therefore all by itself to make the critical landing. Contrary to most of the other landing beaches of Operation Dragoon, Camel Red was heavily mined and included an extensive network of barbed wire, pillboxes and anti-tank walls. The 2 reinforced companies of the 2nd Battalion 765th Grenadiers were further supported by multiple anti-tank and flak guns, all zeroed in on the beach. At 11 a.m, minesweepers had moved forward to sweep the approach lanes in the Gulf of Frejus. However, they soon came under heavy artillery fire and were forced to retreat. Over 90 B-24 bombers subsequently bombed the beach between 12:05 and 12:20 p.m. to soften up the defences. However, when the minesweepers made a second attempt to clear the Gulf of Mines at 12:35 p.m, they were once again met with withering artillery fire, forcing them to retreat a second time. Apex drone boats were sent in at 1 p.m, but these also received heavy fire. 3 of the boats malfunctioned and some had to be destroyed by the Navy. 4 destroyers, 2 cruisers and a battleship commenced a final 45-minute bombardment before the landing crafts began to form up to make their attempt to land at Camel Green at 2 p.m. The landing was initially postponed, and as General Dahlqvist had already gone ashore at 10 a.m, he couldn't be contacted as ship-to-shore communications were still being established. With the German artillery and coastal defences warding off every attempt to clear the Frejus Gulf of Mines, Rear Admiral Spencer Lewis, the commander of Naval Task Force 87, didn't want to have further delays, and he ordered the fleet to land at Camel Green instead. The fleet carrying the 142nd Infantry Regiment subsequently shifted east, where the entire regiment landed at Camel Green without loss. The D-Day objective of capturing Frejus from the southeast by nightfall had to be re-envisaged. By nightfall on 15 August, the 36th Infantry Division had cleared 2 of its beaches. The 141st Infantry Regiment, which spearheaded the landings, had managed to advance several miles inland, almost reaching the N7. They had suffered 5 men killed and 25 wounded, almost all incurred during the clearing up of Agé. The 143rd Infantry Regiment had advanced to within touching distance of Saint-Raphaël, while the 142nd Infantry Regiment had to change their plans to attack Frejus the following day. The 142nd had slowly advanced through the steep wooded hills, encountering sporadic opposition, likely from the 765th Grenadiers as reserve battalion. The 142nd had 5 men wounded that day. Many lives had certainly been spared by having the regiment land at Camel Green instead. During the night, the Luftwaffe would launch its only effective air sortie against the beachhead. Kampfgeschwader 100 made a rare appearance using a Henschel HS-293 guided gliding bomb launched from a Dornier 217 to hit and sink LSD-282. On the morning of 16 August, General Dahlqvist's men continued the advance. Shortly before dawn, the 142nd Infantry Regiment entered Frejus unopposed. However, the leading elements were soon embroiled in a series of skirmishes after daybreak. It wasn't until 1:30 p.m. that the town was secured. Exploiting their gains, they met further resistance while pushing up the Argence Valley later that afternoon. By 9:30 a.m, the 143rd Infantry Regiment reported to have captured Saint-Raphaël. However, as expected, they met stiff opposition in the Camel Red sector as the final remnants of the 765th Grenadiers held out. In the sector of the 141st Infantry Regiment, further progress was made along the N7, capturing Thioul-sur-Mer in the afternoon. They did come across a motorised column, likely elements of the 148th Infantry Division's 239th Grenadier Regiment, which they dispersed with ease. To block the access to Saint-Raphaël from Cannes, the regiment subsequently destroyed a local highway and railway bridge just south of La Napoule. By the morning of 17 August, the Arrowhead Division had reached the Blue Line, from where they could prepare movement towards the northwest. The 36th Infantry Division had reached its objectives, although it did take until the early evening of the 17th until Camel Red was able to open for discharge operations. The division had overcome the toughest of defences along the invasion beaches, capturing the important Frejus and Saint-Raphaël and the N7 road to Cannes. It hadn't been entirely without controversy though. Lewis's decision to abandon Camel Red and land the 142nd Infantry Regiment at Camel Green was later approved by General Dahlquist. However, important time had been lost. Major General Lucien Truscott, in command of the 3 US beaches, had however been critical. He was of the opinion that the failure of assaulting Camel Red subsequently led to further delays in bringing Combat Command Sudre ashore, in turn delaying the capture of the Frejus airfield and Argence Valley. Nevertheless, with a staunch resistance at Camel Red and the mopping up taking until the evening of the 17th, it was deemed highly unlikely that the beach would have been ready to receive Combat Command Sudre early on in the battle. What is certain, however, is that Lewis's decision to land the 142nd at Camel Green led to the saving of multiple American lives for only a minor delay in the grand scheme of the otherwise greatly successful Operation Dragoon landings. This was the Ace Destroyer. If you would like to see more videos like this, why not consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. I hope to catch you in the next one. Cheers!